What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Talking to the Doll Benfica Podcast, episode number 171. Tonight, I am flying solo. No Cristiano, no Steve Santos. So I'm here. I'm going to try to do this by myself. I hope that I don't run out of things to say or get tired. But on tonight's agenda, we will look back at the Luis Felipe Vieira interview to the Bola this past Sunday. We'll also talk a little bit of national team. Nothing too detailed, just a few ideas of mine. Belenenses preview and also the Astana Champions League preview that comes up this Tuesday. Without further ado, I hope everybody's doing well after Labor Day here in the U.S. and for you guys also in Canada. Hope everybody's enjoying a very nice short week. I got to say, I hate these international breaks, to be honest with you, because when Benfica doesn't play, there's some kind of withdrawals that go on here. But nonetheless, we're going to have Benfica coming up this Friday playing against Belenenses. So we'll talk about that in a little bit also. So let's get right into the Luis Felipe Vieira interview. He gave an interview to A Bola this past Sunday. I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but on that same day, JJ was also, it was announced, Record announced that they were going to have a big interview by JJ. So I don't know if there was anything that was planned by Benfica, if A Bola solicited Luis Felipe Vieira, hoping to beat Record on that day for paper sold. So I'm not really sure. The truth of the matter is that Luis Felipe Vieira didn't really speak a lot about JJ. He just said that they were pretty clear about what went on and with his family. And that's all he really said. He actually avoided a couple topics where the Ebola guy, the interviewer, asked him about certain things that might have been involved with JJ, but he just basically just danced around there. He said it's not worth speaking to about it now. My coach is Rui Vitoria, and that's how the direction that I want to take in this interview. So I'll just start by mentioning some things that he said, and the biggest thing, and perhaps the first part of the interview, was you spoke about the new direction that the club wants to take, meaning going in the direction where Seixal is going to be. The club is going to be very dependent on Seixal. He also said that the decision to go to the Seixal is not because of financial reasons, but because there was a significant investment made in the Seixal, and now the Seixal is finally bearing fruits. He also said that the first generation coming out of the Seixal, which we're talking about André Gomes, we're talking about Bernardo Silva to an extent, Cancelo, Ivan Cavaleiro. He said that unfortunately they didn't take advantage of those kids in a sporting way, but none was lost because a lot of those kids brought in a lot of money, especially. And he mentioned this. What kid doesn't play 1 minute for the main team, or plays very limited time for the main team, and is actually fetching 15 million. I mean, those are deals that you really can't pass up on. And I mean, I know that everybody has their feelings about Bernardo Silva, and that's a touchy subject for all of us here in the pod, myself and Steve included. I don't know how Cristiano feels about it, but Steve and I, we have this big thing about Bernardo, as many people have, that we left him too early, and it was a dream for him to play for Benfica, and really has really seen that dream just evaporate in the direction that he went, and he's ended up in France, of course. So he also said that the direction to go to the Seixal as a main feeder to the main club is something that is here to stay. He feels that the club wants to go in that direction, and since a significant investment was done in the Seixal, as I've mentioned, he feels that that's the model now that Benfica wants to go in. He said that, and the reporter actually asked him, so if there's a failure this season where Benfica doesn't really do anything as far as titles or anything like that, uh, will they be there a consideration to abandon the Seychelles project, or to abandon the idea that we're going to feed off of the Seychelles and go in another direction, get back to the path where we were, buying lottery buys out in South America and buying other guys here and there, in exchange for perhaps the direction that the club is going now, which is getting a lot of the Seychelles, getting I mean, if you guys do the research and just if you're paying attention, there's a lot of times, every time that there's a roster list for national teams being U16s, U17s, U19s, whatever it is. If you look at the names, the majority of the players, or the club that puts in most players and these national teams, is Benfica. So there's a certain generation, and perhaps if you want to call it a continuity of talent that's coming up to the system now. I mean, we all know that Benfica has gone through hard times. We didn't always have the infrastructures in place to raise these kids, to bring out talent. As you may know, when the new Stade de Luz was getting constructed or was getting built, the main team, jumped from training ground to training ground around the city of Lisbon. So Benfica never really had the conditions to raise these kids. Not like Sporting. Sporting always had something in place, a structure in place to raise these kids. So Sporting was always known as the main academy for kids to come up. So whether the kids were Benfiquistas or Sportingistas, they knew that there was more opportunity perhaps at Sporting, better conditions at Sporting. That's where they went. Now we're finally seeing a change in the tide, a change in the way things are, where Benfica perhaps has the best infrastructures, the best training facility in the whole country, perhaps one of the best ones in all of Europe. And finally, all of this is bearing fruit now. All these kids, these generations, the Bernardo Silvas, the Ivan Cavaleiros, even the guys that are some of the guys at the B team. You got the Renato Sanchez, which is a great talent. If you've had the opportunity to watch the B team, I think this kid is only 17 years old, and he's or 17 or 18. And I apologize if I'm getting that wrong, but this kid is a starter in a B team. He's playing with men, and he's already at that level. And just like him, there's a couple of the guys that play on the B team that got plenty of talent. So it just seems that there's going to be a continuity in using these players. Of course, I think the mantra this year was that we were going to use 4 players out of the Seychelles, and as a result, I mean, we see Andrade, we see Smith, we see Lindelof, we see a bunch of other guys. We see a couple. João Teixeira is also there. See guys that have actually made the A team. They might not be getting the playing time. Well, when it comes to João Teixeira and Lindelof, we know that Andrade and Smith have gotten their share, but they're part of the A team. So that type of promise was kind of fulfilled by Luis Felipe Vieira, if you want to call it. And then the reporter also asked him, but there was a lot of talk before about Benfica not using players from the B team, and now that Benfica is using players from the B or from the B team or from the Seychelles, there's a huge question on whether or not this team is competitive enough to fight for championships using kids from the Seychelles. So it's kind of like a catch-22 if you want to look at it, where you're kind of damned if you don't and damned if you do. In relation to that, a lot of people feel that Benfica should be including more young kids, and then all of a sudden, Benfica's included kids. We don't have a good enough squad. This and that. We're missing a couple of guys. So there's the catch-22. He also admitted that he could have given Rui Vitória. He would have liked to have given, we tried to have given Rui Vitória a couple more guys, but unfortunately, it wasn't possible. He also mentions that, or actually confirmed that we paid 9 million for Jimenez for 50% of his pass, which kind of goes against everything that we're trying to do. We're trying to go to the Seychelles. You also mentioned that article that Benfica wouldn't be buying any more players like Aymar and Saviola, perhaps guys that had very high salaries, and Benfica is trying to get away from that. We saw some of that with the wage reduction that we proposed to Moxie, where he didn't accept it and he ended up moving elsewhere. But perhaps that's the direction that we want to go to. You mentioned that the kids that are made at the Seychelles, also there's very little value of buy, because since they're raised at the Seychelles, the cost has already been put in there and the investment has already been put in there. And the salary from a starter, from a kid that's just starting on the team, and a kid that's been watched all this time and monitored all this time throughout his career in the Seychelles, is obviously going to be less. So I think what he meant by we won't be buying any more players like Amar or Saviola, and not taking anything away from the value of them. But I think it's the fact of getting these guys that sometimes you could perhaps get on a free, or perhaps on a deal where they're no longer wanted by a club that facilitates our buy. And then when these guys reach Benfica, they ask for a huge salary, sometimes some of the highest salaries of the squad, which probably that's something that we don't want to get into, the high salaries. So that's what Vieira is trying to get away from. So the Jimenez, like I said, 50% for Jimenez, that he paid 50% for 9 million for 50% of his pass. Let's see what else he did. Yeah, so like you said, 2 guys to Vitoria, but it was impossible. When he was asked about Lima, he said that the club or himself weren't going to get in the way of Lima signing the contract of his life after all the years that Lima was a loyal servant to the club. Also, the Moxie, he was asked about Moxie, and he was told that Moxie didn't want to stay. From his perspective, that Moxie didn't want to stay, that Benfica did all they could to keep Moxie, but he said that Moxie and his agent had other plans in hand, in mind. So I'm not really sure what happened there. We all know that Moxie wanted more money, and it all falls into the philosophy that we have now. Lower the wage bill. That was something that was said in the beginning of the season. I think we mentioned that in the pod also, that the wage bill wanted to be lowered. Perhaps that was one of the reasons why we got rid of JJ, or perhaps it was an idea that Luis Felipe Vieira wanted to go in the direction of the Seychelles, like I just said, and he thought that maybe JJ wasn't the right person for that. He also said that Rui Vitoria, he's very happy with Rui Vitoria, and that Rui Vitoria actually coordinates both the A team and a lot of what goes on in the Seychelles, that he has a hand in that. So, so that was pretty much for his interview. Nothing really that groundbreaking or news breaking, if you want to call it. But, it's good to see that the president has a clear idea in what direction he wants to go. And look, if they invested millions and millions on that Seychelles, it's good that they're taking advantage. It's good that they're looking at these kids. I'm not saying that we're going to have a team fully formed of kids from the Seychelles, but I think it's good when you're supplementing the A team with kids that have talent, with kids that will bring a smaller wage bill. And maybe we could afford to go and buy these other players that will fill in, and the kids will just complement these teams, these players, and will make for a very competitive team. So we'll just have to see how that develops. But that's the direction that he wants to go in, and that was basically the main idea of the interview. We're just talking about the direction and the new pragmatism that the club wants to go into. So that was it for the Luis Felipe Vieira interview. So I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit too fast without people here. I'm just gonna breeze through this. It's gonna be probably gonna be one of the shortest podcasts that you've heard um, in the history of the podcast. So let's see. Let's see what we got going up. We got Belenenses coming up. Comes up this Friday. Obviously, we play Friday because we got FC Astana on Tuesday. So we're gonna get this game out of the way and just play it. Belenenses is currently 12th with 3 points. All 3 points coming from ties in their third and in 3 games. Last 10 matches between the two teams, 8 wins for Benfica, 2 ties for both Benfica and Belenenses, obviously. Dalcio, who was a player that's been rumored that is connected to Benfica, is not going to be available. I think the media has already reported that today. What else? Bruno Paixão is the referee for this match. I don't know if you know Bruno Paixão or not, but he's the referee. He was the one nominated. I know that you've heard about there was a thing with the drawing for the referees, but they're sticking to the nomination. I think that's the vote that won. So the nomination for this game is going to be Bruno Paixão. So that's pretty much it. The game takes place this Friday, 8:30 at Estádio da Luz against Belenenses, and Belenenses prides himself into being the one team who fields all Portuguese players, I think, or something like that. Sapinto is their coach, another fiery character. So we're gonna have to watch that. Watch out for that. There's also been rumors that Tarbat is within the weight that it was asked of him, and he may very well be an option against Belenenses. Another return, perhaps Jardel. I think the media was saying that Jardel will be available for this game. So we'll just have to look to see if these guys get called up. The thing with Jardel, with Lisandro Lopes haven't played so well in these past 3 games that Jardel didn't play. I'll be curious to see if Jardel makes a jump directly into the lineup, or if Lisandro Lopes continues to deserve Rui Vitória's confidence. So we'll just have to watch out for that. So next topic, I guess, and flying. National team. So Portuguese national team played this past Tuesday against Albania, which was one of the teams that had beaten the national team. Portugal currently stands 15 points in first place, 15 points with 6 games played, with 2 more games to play. Denmark is second with 12 points, and they've already played 7 games. Albania is third with 11 points with 6 games played. So Portugal, all they need really is a point against Denmark, which they play next on October 8th. And if they get a point against Denmark, then automatically through, or a point or more, obviously. So they'll just need to get 1 point out of the last 2 games to go. I'm not sure who Portugal plays in the last game, but the rest of the group, Armenia is in 2 points, so no danger there that Armenia is going to challenge for a spot. And Serbia, that's a huge surprise. 1 point out of 6 games played. That team with so much talent has really not done well this qualification period. So it doesn't look like they're going to go anywhere with 2 games to go and only 1 point to their record. The top 2 teams advanced into the European Championship. I think that I'm not sure there's, I think 1 or 2 best third places also go on. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's the rules. As far as the national team, I mean, I got to be honest, and Steve and I have mentioned this. I've kind of lost a little bit of passion for the national team. I mean, doesn't have anything to do with being a nationalist or not loving the country. I just think that the national team, after that golden generation, really took a a dive as far as what their value is, and some of the characters too that they came into the national team, guys that regardless of what team they played for, weren't really guys that I really liked a lot, and I think that Steve has the same opinion. I just keep thinking that the biggest problem for this national team is that we will never be real contenders unless we have a forward, a true forward. And I'm not talking about a guy that was perhaps going to be world class, but I'm saying a guy that can move around. I mean, I'm not talking about a Postiga or a guy at that same level, but I'm talking about maybe a guy slightly a little bit above what Paleta used to do. Of course, Paleta broke the Eusebio record, which has now been taken over by Ronaldo. But I think that if we can't get a guy to play in the center of the attack, that's a good viable option. I think we'll never really be contenders. The thing that Fernando Santos tried to do with Ronaldo, put him up top with Bernardo and Nani on the sides. I don't think that works. I don't think that Ronaldo likes playing there, and it clearly affects him. And not only affects his game, but also affects him mentally. So we'll just have to see what happens or who develops the kid from the U19. I forget what his name is. I think his name is André something from Porto. He's still young, but he just scored 3 goals against Albania in the U19s or U21 qualification for whatever they're qualifying now. But I mean, that kid seems to be the biggest promise right now. And even the U21s in New Zealand didn't really play with a center forward. They had a similar setup that what we have in the A team right now. So we'll just have to see and see what develops. But this kid is too young still. We got Domingos' kid. I'm sorry, Paciencia's kid. Is it Paciencia's kid? I don't know. No, don't quote me on that. Anyway, I think as far as with the team and what the future holds for the team, I think that there's, and as you guys know, U19s and U21s did very well in their championships that they participated in. So there's definitely a bright future. I think that right now, the players that we have for the midfield, if we can phase them in correctly, I think we could have a midfield that could fight with any midfield at any level, any team really in the world, and be just as competitive with the midfield. I mean, I'm talking about guys like André Gomes, Carvalho, João Mario, even Bernardo Silva. I know he plays a little bit more on the wings, but I mean, you got guys that could play that midfield position. Danilo, I really liked what I saw from Danilo against Albania. I think that Veloso is past his prime. I understand that Moutinho wasn't available, Carvalho wasn't available, so Veloso was perhaps the next best thing. I think that if those guys are healthy, I don't think that Veloso gets in there. Granted, he scored that last minute goal that gave us the 3 points, but I just think that we're past Veloso, and with this new generation, I think that I hope at least that the national team coach finds a way to phase out to phase in the new talent, and phase out the older talent. I just hope that we don't get to a point where some of the older guys, or vacas sagradas, if you want to call it, are there and it becomes too late. It gets to a point that is so visible that this guy is no longer at the level that we need him to be, that we need to phase him out, or that we need to get him out for sure. I just hope that there's a somewhat of a seamless transition into this new generation, this U21 generation that competed in the European Championship. I hope that there's a seamless transition where we keep that same level. And these kids are just coming into their own right now. They're ripe for the taking, and I hope that the national team looks the other way when it comes to these established veterans that are on the way down, and kind of phases in the kids that are coming up and that are really the future of this national team. I think that the generations that are coming are definitely generations that have grabbed my attention, and perhaps a lot of people's attention, and perhaps a lot of people's imagination. And I think that the generations that are to come are generations that could bring in more of the fans that've kind of lost a little bit of the passion for the national team ever since the golden generation kind of went away. The Figo, the Rui Costa, you know what I'm talking about. So we'll just have to see what happens there. So I don't think I have much to say about the national team. I mean, they looked at disarray at times. They dominated the game against Albania, but just lacking that sharpness, you know, that mental sharpness, the skills, just to break down teams like Albania. You know, anything that has Cristiano Ronaldo, you're going to be subject to different marking schemes, different defending schemes. They're going to take away the spaces. We just have to find a way to penetrate these teams. And I think that right now, I think that there's a lot of talent perhaps missing and a lot of imagination missing from this team in order to be able to win these games. So we'll just have to see what happens. I don't have any doubts that we'll make into the European Championship, especially when the top two teams advance. But if we're going to be competitive in the European Championships in France, I'd like to see some of the new blood come in, because I think that's where the key lies. I think that Ronaldo perhaps has maybe 1-2 years at the top of his game. I think after that he's going to lose some of that speed that he has. So we kind of maybe surrounded by some of this new talent, and hopefully finally he could bring a trophy for Portugal, which is something that he's been missing for quite some time. We had our best opportunity in the Euro in Portugal, but that kind of was squandered. So I think that's pretty much for the national team. I think they'll qualify. So and that's it. Now, Champions League, Tuesday, FC Astana. On paper, perhaps the easiest game of the group. The game has been played at Stade de Luz, 7:45 local. Astana had to play three pre-qualifiers to get to the group stages. They defeated Maribor, HJK, and Apoel. Their record off the 6 games was 3 wins, 2 ties, and 1 loss. And this is really the team that nobody really expected. I don't know if I would call them a Cinderella team. Let's see what they do. They'd have to do something. They have to, but so far they are the Cinderellas of the pre-qualifiers, if you want to call it. At least they made it. Sporting didn't. So they're there. That's what matters. And for a club, I don't know much about the club. I don't know the history of the club. I don't know if there's money behind it. I don't know if there's investors behind it. But 14 million to make the Champions League, which I think is a little bit more since they played pre-qualifiers, and TV money also. I think that's a huge thing for such a small club in a country that's better known for Borat rather than it's football. So we'll just have to see. Like I said, first game of the group is always an important game of the group. It is, you want to start with the right foot. Benfica opens up at Stade de Luz with the easiest team on paper, but I think there's a much bigger responsibility and pressure to win this game, being that this is a game that you are supposed to win. Not only are you playing at home, but you're also playing against a team that came out of pot 4. So this is there's pressure on Benfica to win this, and I think that you need to get the 3 points on this game. And I know that when we spoke about the group and the qualifying a couple weeks ago or last week, there's somebody that said we usually 10 points will get us through. Well, we need to get 3 points out of those 10 right here in this game, and hopefully we can get the other one when we visit Astana on the 25th of November. But these 3 points are absolutely crucial. Also, I think that 3 points, I think it gets you $1 million for the win. I'm not really sure, but I think it's something like that. It's $1 million for the win and 500 for the tie, if I'm not mistaken. So that money, especially for Benfica, who hasn't really sold a significant amount of players like we have sold in past years. This money will be very welcome, especially last year too, where we went out of the group stage, and I think we had maybe one win out of the whole qualifying campaign. So we need to grab this win. We're also looking at a team, a Rui Vitória team that's looking to establish themselves, that's looking to get themselves into a certain flow, develop their own style. Because as I've said maybe 2-3 weeks ago, this is a team that is kind of has an identity crisis at the moment. So we'll see. I'm anxious to see how the team plays this Friday, especially after this long layoff and guys coming into their own. Rui Vitória having more time to work these guys, to establish his ideas, to transfer his ideas to his players, the players assimilating the ideas of Rui Vitória. I'm anxious to see how the team is going to play against Belenenses. I don't think it's going to be an easy game against Belenenses by all means, because of their coach and perhaps because they're so motivated from what they've done so far. They qualified for the group stage of the Europa League. So I'm curious to see how the team is going to look, especially after this long layoff. And look, it could work two ways. You could either do well because you've had time. You've had time to develop certain processes, train certain routines, and you rested guys, you brought guys out from injury. Not that it's the middle or the end of the season where a lot of guys are needing rest, but there's guys, Jardel being one of them, that needed a little bit of rest. I think that Carcelo was fighting a little bit with a knock. I think Tarbate's got that weight issue. So I'm curious. It's good in that way to recuperate guys and to bring guys into the fold. But by the same token, a lot of these guys, when they don't play, they lose some of that sharpness that they have when they play week in and week out. And I'm not talking about the internationals. Obviously, the guys that went away to the national teams have kept somewhat of a routine where they're playing every weekend. But the guys that had stayed behind at the Seychelles, there's always a worry that lengthy period of time where they haven't played against anyone, in a official matter, there's always going to be a worry that these guys are not going to be as sharp, that Benfica is not going to start as fast as they should against Belenenses. And the other thing, in talking about starting fast, we've also been scored twice early in a game, which is something that we've had to fight, I think, 2 times at least from behind to play these games. I think Estoril was one of them, and just this past one against Moreirense when they went ahead, and we've had to fight from behind. So the key is to start fast against Belenenses, take the game right to them, and just get an early goal, because the levels of anxiety at this point are still very high for this Benfica team. And obviously, with the fans looking on, we're a little bit of a suspicious eye, waiting to see what comes of this Rui Vitória and this team. The team's got to be feeling some of the pressure. I mean, they probably, most likely, they believe in the work that Rui Vitória has been doing with them in the training pitch and at the Seychelles. But, I mean, these guys, they read the papers. They're out in the streets. I'm sure people approach them and say, hey, what's going on? You guys are going to get this done or what? There's always that, the player is not totally isolated to what's going on as far as the fan base goes, as far as what the media says. So there's a little bit of a focus that needs to be there, and not to mention that after the Astana game, we go to the Dragão. So that's something that you want to win this Belenenses game, and you want to build. You want to take the momentum, and not only into the Astana game, where you'd win, but also into the Dragão, where it's a crucial game in the league, albeit it's still very early for anything to be decided. But it's a game where we could get right back up on Porto and right back up at the top of the table if we win at the Dragão, something that doesn't happen very often. But I think that if we could carry that momentum, and if the team hits stride this early in the season, it's very possible that will have a good game at the Dragão, and perhaps the fact that a lot of teams are looking at Benfica with a suspicious eye and thinking that perhaps out of the three teams, Benfica is the weakest team. Maybe that benefits us in the end, where where teams might not take us as serious as they have in years past under JJ's tutelage. So we'll just have to see. But important game coming up this Friday against Belenenses. As I said, 8:30 local. The game will be on Benfica TV, and then Astana on Tuesday at 2:40, 7:45 local, as it is with all Champions League games. Also, game at Stade de Luz. Just a little bit of news, just to report to finish up the podcast here. Jonas has renewed until 2018. His contract was going to be up in June, and Benfica has decided to renew his contract into 2018. Very good news for Benfica, especially considering a guy that we got on a free with the championship already going, and he was able to produce that many goals, be the second place goal scorer for the league, having played 3 or 4 less games than Jackson Martinez. He was incredible for us last season. He hasn't been that machine yet that he was last year. This season, perhaps he's missing a little bit of Lima. Perhaps he still has to get used to the partner he's going to have up front, whether be it Mitroglou or Jimenez. So he still has yet to hit stride, and he knows that he owes the fans, and he knows that the fans expect a lot from him, especially now having just signed the renewal. He knows that people are going to be waiting for him to make big contributions to this team, and he also knows personally that the values of the renewal weren't divulged, but he knows that if the club made an effort to renew him this early, even before we hit to December, he knows that there's a commitment and also a little bit of pressure by the club for him to be the player that we want him to be. So good news renewing with Jonas until 2018. I hear that Julius Caesar might be next from what the reports say. What else? In January, there's also talk about Grimaldo and Servi coming in January. Nothing has been confirmed, but Servi is an Argentinian, and Grimaldo, I think, is a Barcelona left back, if I'm not mistaken. Also in the news, the Benfica SAD reported a profit of 7.1 million in the first semester of the year, and they have also reduced their debt by 19.4 million. So good news. It wasn't as big of a profit as last year. Of course, last year we had some big, huge sales, so we kind of cashed in on that. But nevertheless, 7.1 million profit after all is said and done is a pretty good result for Benfica. So I think that's about it. I wish I had some time to just look at Twitter and just answer some of the questions, or if you guys have anything going on. But I just don't. I'm here by myself, and I kind of, I'm hoping that I was hoping that I could get somebody, but I think Cristiano just arrived from Portugal today. Let's see. But I'm looking through Twitter real quick, so please excuse me. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for checking us out. Sorry if I rambled a little bit. Without partners here, this becomes a little difficult. I hope that I was able to be as entertaining as when I have those other two guys or three guys. planetbenfica.co.uk, benficapodcast.com, at Benfica Podcast on Twitter, at 10CO10 is Cristiano's Twitter, at Steve Santos 6 is where you can find the chalkboard. And I think that's pretty much it. We will be back. We're still trying to decide whether it's going to be Tuesday, since Benfica plays Astana on Tuesday. Will give us a chance to watch the game and then talk a little bit more in depth about the game on Wednesday, if we decide to go on Wednesday. On Tuesday, I'll be honest, I probably won't have a chance to watch the game live, and any downloads I might get, it might take me too long to watch the game. So most likely next week we will be back again on Wednesday. Hopefully Cristiano will be here, and also Mr. Santos will be here. So thanks everybody for checking us out. Don't forget to subscribe via iTunes. It's free. Stitcher Radio, we're also there. RSS feed, we're also there. Any of your podcast aggregators, we can find us by typing in Talking to the Doll Benfica Podcast, and we'll be showing up there. And then you could just subscribe and download all our episodes. They're all available. Anyway, thanks a lot for checking us out. And thanks a lot for keeping up with me tonight. It was a short one, but I hope it was worth your time. So thanks a lot. Next week, we will break down the Astana game. We'll break down the Belenenses game, and we'll have a big preview of the Benfica trip to the Dragão. Thanks a lot. See you guys next week. See ya.